Behind the Attic Wall by Sylvia Cassedy, Chapter 12. The thing was that it all happened little by little, the way lights go down in an auditorium, so slowly you aren't sure that they're going down at all. But by the time everything is finally dark, you feel no surprise. In the beginning, the sounds that penetrated the silence at Adelphi Hills could barely be called sounds at all, rustles maybe, or rushings in the air, and so gentle they never caused Maggie's eyes to lift from her book, or her hand to waver over the spread of playing cards on her bed. Only later, days, weeks, could they actually be heard, not just felt, and even then they were small sounds, no louder than the stirring of a clock about to chime, or a faraway cry of a flight of geese. Not even whispers. Maggie ignored them, as she did the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Then, she didn't know when, they became tiny murmurs, with words she could pick out, little scraps of speech falling here, like dried leaves, but far off, as though from a radio left playing in some distant room. "Careful," she heard once, or thought she heard. "It will break," and "Get the broom." But even then she didn't notice, not much anyway. Maybe her aunts had hired someone to work in an unknown region beneath the stairs. Maybe they had put up some visitors in a room that she had never seen. Maybe a lot of things. She returned to her cards, little by little, so that when one day they spoke so clearly she dropped her fork on the floor, she was startled but not quite surprised. "The roses need watering," someone said aloud, clearly from just behind her chair at the dining table, and the fork flew from her hand. "I'll take the dog with me." Maggie's head shot around, but no one was there. "Who else is in this house?" she demanded, looking from one aunt to the other. The two old sisters looked up at her in surprise. She rarely spoke at the dinner table. "Swallow your food before you speak," Aunt Lillian said. "Who else is here?" Maggie insisted. "Besides us, who's saying all those things?" "Who's saying all what things? Chew your food before you swallow it. Different things, like about a dog and the roses and a broom sometimes." Aunt Harriet looked down the table at her sister. Two vertical wrinkles appeared above her nose, and she drew her brows together. "It is nerves," she said. "She is high-strung. I knew it the moment I laid eyes upon her. That is a nervous child, I said. Nervous and high-strung, she needs something to calm her down." "Hot milk at bedtime," Aunt Lillian pronounced, and returned to her dinner. "It's not my nerves," Maggie's voice rose. "Somebody is saying things. Somebody said something just now. Somebody's here." But her aunts only lifted their heads and gazed down at her. "Don't shout," Aunt Lillian said. "Excitement at meal times interferes with digestion. Remember that. Always be calm when you eat." Maggie stared at them. What was going on here anyway? Why couldn't her aunts hear voices that were in the same room with them, and that spoke as plainly as Maggie did herself? What were the voices? Who were they? Or was no one there? Maybe, she thought with a chill, she was going crazy. Another time, "It says here there's been a fire," and Maggie jumped in her chair in the parlor. "Who said that?" "Lower your voice," Aunt Harriet said from her writing desk, and Aunt Lillian stopped moving the dustcloth up and down the spindles of a chair. "Pity, or pity, maybe." The voice grew faint, then louder. "Have you set the table yet? Which plates should we use? The ones with the pansies." "Who's saying all that stuff?" Maggie half rose from her seat. "Don't say stuff," Aunt Harriet said briskly, putting down her pen. "It's vulgar." Who just said that about a fire and then about plates with pansies or something? "Nobody said anything," Aunt Harriet said, and she returned to her letters, moistening their envelopes with a tiny rubber sponge. "Never lick envelopes or stamps," she had cautioned Maggie once. "They are unclean." "You were sleeping in your chair," Aunt Lillian said, going back to her dusting. "I was not. I was wide awake." "Sound asleep," Aunt Lillian answered. "I watched you breathe." And then, to Aunt Harriet, "She has poor sleeping habits." "She gets no exercise," Aunt Harriet said. "No exercise and no fresh air." "She should take walks," Aunt Lillian said. "From now on there will be a walk every night before bedtime. It is no wonder she falls asleep in her chair." Still, someone was there. She was sure of it. More than some two, or three, enough for a conversation. Their voices were everywhere now, In the dining room and in the parlor, in the hallway, on the stairs, in her room. "How about a turn in the garden?" she heard suddenly as she sat in her window seat, and she jumped up, giving the curtain a violent shake. "No, I'll stay here and rest my feet." She cranked the window open as far as it would go, leaning into the blazing light, turning this way, that way, reaching too far out. Who's there? But the garden lay as still as a page in a book. "Turn in the garden wall. A turn in the garden will clear your head." The voice was in the closet, and Maggie flung open the door. "Where are you?" The quiet row of dresses hung motionless and unanswering from its pole. "My head is quite clear." The wall now, and Maggie pressed her ear against its surface. "Where?" "We will take the dog." Another wall, and Maggie rapped it with her knuckles, shriveling her skin. But he is asleep." Still another wall, and Maggie tapped again. "Who's there? Who?" Then something about a kettle, a question, something, "In the kettle?" from the sink, and she picked up her toothbrush cup. In her last school, somebody showed her how to listen to conversations in another room by putting a glass to the wall and pressing her ear against its bottom. She tried that now, moving the toothbrush cup about the wall the way a doctor sometimes places a stethoscope here and there on a bare chest. But the voices only came and went from one wall to the next, and then traveled out the door, down the hall, in one room, out another. Maggie chased after them, entering rooms that were forbidden to her. Aunt Lillian's, Aunt Harriet's, the children's bedrooms with their empty beds, the old-fashioned schoolroom, the empty room with the varnished floor, but the voices vanished when she approached. There was a game that the girls in her old school used to play. One girl would search for a hidden thimble, and everyone else would cry out hot or cold as whoever it was, never Maggie, moved uncertainly among the desks and chairs, looking hotter, hotter, burning, when she drew close, and then warm, cold, freezing, as maddeningly she moved farther and farther away from the silver thimble, tucked neatly into the water faucet at the sink. Maggie thought of that now as she put one foot in front of the other and waited, listening for some clue that would tell her where to look. Where were they? Where were they hiding? Was she hot or cold? She heard them in the garden. "Back so soon?" She was sitting in the little rooms, laid out with sticks under the birches. "It was too cool," and she moved her ear about the tree trunk like a divining rod in search of treasure. Where were they? Voices without people? Why could only she hear them? If she was imagining them, why did she hear them only in and around the house, never in school? Suddenly she remembered what Jeanette had said during her visit about how the house was haunted, and she remembered something else, a fleeting face in some high window, caught by her eye like a sunbeam, as she moved from the car up the front walk the day she arrived. And that is the end of Chapter 12.